Hey, welcome to Mr. Berry's 8th grade literature class. This is a lesson on literary archetypes. Make sure that you have your notes with you and you're taking accurate notes because this content will be tested and you'll be asked to look for archetypes in a variety of forms of different texts like film, myths, and of course novels. So we don't waste any more of your time. Let's get started. This lesson is going to be looking at the symbolic archetypes. So symbolic archetypes are reoccurring symbols or objects, sometimes colors, sometimes items that are used in literature. Now, symbols can be a pretty difficult concept to understand if it's the first time you're hearing it. So we're going to take a little bit of time to make sure that you understand what symbols are, and then we can look at some examples of symbolic archetypes that exist in literature. All right, so symbols, what are they? What are they used for? I want you to just take a minute. If you haven't done the pre-test, do the pre-test. Let me know what you know about symbols. And right now, just kind of jot a note down. What are symbols? What are they used for? Obviously, this image is giving you some kind of clue as to what symbols are, and I'll tell you, symbols are pictures that represent a bigger idea. So most of you out there have used emojis. Emoji is an example of a symbol. Emojis express human feelings to people that you send them to. So maybe you're speaking with somebody and you say hello and you use the sad emoji. Obviously, you're going to be kind of expressing to that person that you're lonely or you're sad or you're in a negative mood. But if you say hello and use a happy emoji, you're communicating. I can't draw on this. You're communicating a different idea. So hello can mean different things if you attach a different emoji to it. Take a look at this picture. Can you read that middle sign right here? Well, most of us probably cannot read this sign right here because it's in another language. But can you read the blinking sign here? Sure, there's no words on it, but that sign communicates something to us. Obviously, we can read that. It says that the green light means that the BBD can boobadoo. Well, symbols exist in literature and film and comic books and movies and video games and all over the place too. Just for the sake of your notes, take down this definition. So symbols are objects or things that have deeper meanings. Symbols represent a larger idea in the story and help to move the theme. So basically, symbols add to our depth of understanding in a story. Here we have pictures of symbols from cartoon movies. So we have the lamp from Aladdin, or we have the apple from Snow White. There's a number of different symbols that are used in literature. Of course, body language can also be symbols too, just as another example. So take a look at these three pictures. What ideas or messages are being conveyed through the use of body language? So finding symbols in art and pictures can be tricky. Take a look at this picture here. What symbols do you see? Maybe you recognize this picture from Noah's Ark, biblical story. I'm sure you notice that there are at least two clear symbols here. We have the dove and we have the rainbow. Any idea of what those symbols may mean? Well, we will look at that in another time, but keep those in mind. Actually, there's more than just those two symbols in that picture, but we'll talk about that later on. So finding symbols in literature can be really tricky too. But you need to look for objects or things that appear in a story over and over and over and over and over again. If an object appears over and over and over again randomly, it's not random. It's probably a symbol. So if you see an object mentioned, say an apple, mentioned again and again and again and again in the story, you should take a step back and think about what the deeper meaning of the apple might be. So brainstorm some symbols that you've seen in movies, TV shows, novels, comic books, songs, etc. Alright, so the first symbolic archetype is the light versus dark. Let's just stop here. Alright, the next set of symbolic archetypes are the haven versus the wilderness. So, usually in texts and stories, places of safety are shown in contrast against dangerous wilderness. And sometimes the wilderness is in the forest, sometimes it's in the desert, sometimes it's in the tundra up north in the snow. It can come in a number of forms. So a character typically will be wandering, lost in some form of wilderness, and that usually represents that they themselves are lost and they don't know who they truly are, and they're trying to find themselves and find their identity. Whereas a haven, a nice shelter from the wilderness, represents a place of safety. So sometimes a place of safety will represent resources or health or positivity or becoming to an understanding of who they are as an individual. And sometimes this shows up as a desert, and the flip side kind of shows up when a character finds an oasis or is able to drink water. And water also is another symbol for life, purity, baptism, renewal, and health. Next one we're going to look at is the weather. So the weather plays a really important part in stories. So if there is a storm, it's usually an indication that bad things are going to happen. Okay. Sometimes rain can symbolize that a character is sad, or that bad things are going to happen, or something sad is going to come. So it might be a little bit of foreshadowing. Sometimes rain, though, can represent a positive thing. It can mean renewal or life, because things don't grow or develop without rain. Okay. Fog is also another example of weather having a deeper meaning. So if a character is traveling through fog, it means they may be lost, or their path might not be clear to them. Next symbolic archetype is the unhealable wound. So a lot of times a character will have a wound that's either physical or psychological, and it can't be fully healed. So the example of Finding Nemo, Nemo has his little fin. Okay? Sometimes the wound is not physical, but it is psychological. It's mental. We don't see it on the outside, but it's something that they're burdened with. All right, so we have the example of Elsa, who has an unhealable wound. She can't control the power to freeze everything. In The Great Gatsby, Gatsby's great unhealable wound is that he is still in love with his old girlfriend Daisy, and everything that he does is motivated by his love for her. All right, another unhealable wound another symbolic archetype is when a character crosses the threshold. That usually is shown when a character goes into a new place. Okay, so a lot of times characters are going on a journey and they have to take the first step. Them taking the first step is called crossing the threshold, and it represents that this character is growing and becoming a new person. So sometimes they have to go into darkness, sometimes they cross through a doorway, sometimes they take a ship and they sail across an ocean, sometimes they go through a wardrobe or a cabinet and come into a new world on the other side. So there's a number of ways that these characters take a new step in their lives, and it is represented by them traveling in the physical world. So if a character travels in the physical world, it usually means that they're developing as an individual as well. There's tons and tons and tons of other symbolic archetypes. We can't really look at them all, but a few more are apples, representing life and death, skulls and skeletons, representing mortality and death, Masks represent hiding someone's identity or not knowing themselves or having another side of their personality. There's plenty of other objects. Anything really can be a symbol if the author wants it to be. So we have to be careful to look at items or objects that are repeated in a text and think about what their deeper meaning may be. All right, also colors, we know this. They represent things. If we were asked to think about what the color red represents, you may say love, you may say anger. Black and white we already talked about. In a way, it's very similar to light and darkness. The color yellow represents happiness, cheerfulness, warmth. Green represents luck, fertility, growth, healing, jealousy, health, and wealth. And understanding what the symbol might actually mean might take time. These things are difficult things, but all this stuff comes with practice. So don't give up.